So, hi guys, this is Kenya from Enya K Art. Today I want to probably do a bit more, well, actually no, not probably. I want to actually finish these last two um, little portions of my little, like, what is this? This is a study sheet. Yeah, I'll call it a study sheet. For the last few weeks or month or so, I've been trying to learn color theory, and so I've been following a book that, oh, let me get the book. Okay, so actually I have 3 books. The first one I will mention is Color and Light by James Gurney. He is really good. I haven't actually finished the book yet, but I think he's really good for like the kind of realist style of painting and getting that understanding of color theory in that very technical sense, but also of I think what I really value his stuff for is usage of light. Like, I quite love that there's these little busts that show the different lighting conditions and how, you know, a person might look in those conditions. So I quite like his stuff for that. And as you can see, I am at this section of the book here with warm and cool colors, so that's where I've reached so far. But quite enjoying this book. But in addition to that, I also have this first book, which was truly transformative for me in learning about color theory and why, when I was trying to mix a certain color, why I was just not getting the colors that I wanted. So I got this book on Thrift Books, Blue and Yellow Don't Make Green, or How to Mix the Color You Really Want Every Time. And I have also not necessarily finished this book yet, but I did read the most important chapters of it, which is going through kind of like why certain colors will not give the exact mix that you expect. If you mix it in red and blue, why you might get a different outcome depending on which red and blue you mix. So, for example, this red is more on the orangey side, while this blue is more on the purpley side. So you kind of get that in between in between kind of violet, brownish, gray color because of that. However, this red is a little bit more on the purple side, and this blue is more on the greenish side. And so you also kind of get not as bad as this one, but you know, still a muted purpley color. Meanwhile, these two are both on the purple end of the spectrum, and so you get a very nice rich violet color here. So I think this book was really pivotal for me in understanding that, and I think it's something that anybody should have in their repertoire when it's probably like a first step, I think, for like learning color theory. And then it also has some really useful color charts here. Something I want to start referencing this a bit more in my paintings, but I think this book is wonderful, and anybody would be lucky to have this in their repertoire. But the last book, and the one I'm actually using to produce these studies, is Color Choices, Making Color Sense Out of Color Theory by Stephen Quiller. So I also got this book over Thrift Books, but somehow I feel like I bought it new. Can't remember though. But I absolutely love this book. I love Quiller's style. Like, he has just such a dreamy, beautiful style, and his like mastery of color is just pronounced throughout this book. So I have reached this section on analogous colors, but I did go through, and I went through from the beginning. I quite appreciate his color wheel. In fact, it's something that I actually have on my wall. I actually printed this out and put it on my wall. So I absolutely love this, because what I appreciated about this is, like, while the other 2 books really go into depth in theory of color theory, I feel like this makes it way more actionable because of the fact that this uses just actual pigment colors that you know, when I go to buy my watercolors or when I go to buy gouache or acrylics or whatever. This is just the actual names of the colors that you would see, you know, cadmium, scarlet, and phthalo blue and whatnot. So I find this really helpful for the practical side of using color theory to make like paintings. And then I quite like how well he, you know, goes all the same thing in terms of like depending on what kind of reds and blues you mix, so you'll get different types of violets. And I really love his paintings, so I have tried to emulate them. So for example, like using this as like inspiration, I did somewhat base this off of this, if you can see it here. So I try to use his stuff as like studies. Um, so for example, you know, in this section, I think this was on complementary colors or warm and cool. I did base this off of this. And then another section, yep, I want to believe, I think these were something like this, but yeah, so I use this book to kind of implement color theory in practice, you know. Definitely not as gorgeous as his, but I did base it off of that. So I quite love this book, and so oh no, I ripped it by accident. Oopsies. Yeah, but I would like to use this, well, continue using this book and probably actually fill out, you know, these last two. Enough chit chat about that. I would like to stop, but I need to figure out which two paintings I'm actually going to do. So the section of the book I've reached is on analogous colors. These are colors adjacent to each other on the color wheel that, when used together, tend to promote harmony in a painting or a piece of artwork. For this reference, the three analogous colors were red violet, blue violet, and violet in the middle, which for my Winsor & Newton gouache palette corresponded to alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and then to get the violet I just mixed both of them as I didn't really have this in the tube. I think one of the things that this book does really well is to get you to not only think about the colors that you're primarily using, but also how to get the full spectrum of those colors. For example, by using the color complement to be able to get the range of saturated and desaturated colors that you want. So if you notice on my palette, I also have a bit of viridian green, as this is a direct contrast to the alizarin crimson and allows me to get some more of those desaturated colors for this very calming scene. So although I'm using gouache, I think you'll see here that my application is very similar to as if I was working with watercolor. And that's because I really appreciate that you can get that full range of transparencies with gouache. So I did start by generally wetting the paper, and I am using Arch's 300 GSM watercolor paper, cold press. So that allows the color to spread when I pull it onto the paper. So I'm not gonna lie guys, these are some really small pieces. I didn't really measure it out when I put on the tape, but it's somewhat like 2 inches by 3 inches for each one, give or take. And just editing this video, I was shocked by how long it took me to do these. I don't know if you guys ever feel like that. Like, I know I am a beginner artist, I know I'm still learning, but sometimes I feel like I should be able to do these things a little bit faster. But I feel like I could narrow it down to that. I just haven't fully figured out my process for how I do things. I'm still optimizing. For example, maybe I could have mixed up some of the colors a bit earlier before putting it on the paper. Yeah, I definitely feel like I work pretty slow, but I'm hoping that's something I could work on.
And with those final touches, we are done. I really enjoyed using these non-conventional colors for this beach scene. I quite liked how I dragged the white across the middle there to make the effect of the ocean, and I love how I got the rocks actually protrude into the sky. Oh, here I'm just showing how my water looked really nice and purple after all of that work. But yeah, moving on to the next one. So for the final piece on the study sheet, I did want to start with a bit more structure. So here I am starting with one of my green Faber-Castell polychromos pencils. These are really lovely for sketching and I quite enjoy how easy they are to erase and how they somewhat fade into the background even when transparent layers are used. For this scene, the reference used analogous colors on the green-blue side of the color wheel, the three analogous colors being a green-blue, and a blue. It's been a while since I painted this, so I'm kind of trying to remember exactly which colors I used, but looking at my gouache palette, that most likely corresponded with me using a Viridian green, Prussian blue, and I also have a turquoise paint in the tube as well. The effect that these three colors give is very calming, like the previous painting. So I think you're noticing that with the analogous colors, you can get some really calming, harmonizing effects. And I quite love that, and it's something I need to consider in any of my future art pieces. With this sketch, I wanted to do a bit more of the work up front just to make it a bit easier for myself when I'm actually doing the painting. So you'll notice that I am doing a lot of work to ensure that the shadow areas or in general the different values in the scene are fairly represented so that I could quickly pick out where the shadows are, where buildings and objects are intersecting with each other, where you have the deepest values overall in the image, and this makes it so much easier when I'm mixing the colors and I'm coming to the page to know where these things have to go. So just like with the previous piece, I am employing some watercolor type techniques even though I'm using gouache. So as you see, I started with wetting the paper and then I just kind of brushed in the colors that I was using and allowed them to drip down the page in the wet area. I am painting on an easel that's at a slight angle, one of those tabletop easels, because I don't have like my own studio or anything. I'm just doing everything on my tabletop. But I still think I got that really nice effect of the sky, especially with the drips or even with the drips down the page. If you've made it this far so far, I honestly just want to say thank you. I know I'm still figuring out what I'm trying to do with this YouTube channel. Drawing is something I really loved. I started doing it back in 2024, I believe. And even though it's been almost a year that I've started, like I'm still kind of figuring things out. I know the things I enjoy, but there's a bunch of stuff that I still actually want to be able to do. And I'm hoping this YouTube channel could allow me to document it and also to help me to find some more like-minded people and maybe build a community of people who, well, I'm in my 20s, my late 20s, people who started what feels like late and are just learning to enjoy it and create, well, yeah, just enjoy creating, make things they love, and, no obligation for it to be the best thing ever, but it's something that, at least for me, I wake up every day and I love the idea and I love being able to do a bit of art, even if it's a small little sketch like this. So if you guys have made it this far, I'd love for you to tell me like what kind of things you'd like me to do. I did set up my goals for the year so far, and I know some of the things that I want to be able to do, including post more on YouTube, but also like, try out some different mediums and maybe create a few more finished pieces. I also want to try out like doing things like comics and stuff because I do enjoy like character drawing and whatnot. So yeah, if you've made it this far, honestly, let me know like what would you guys like to see? Maybe leave a comment, and also would appreciate if you guys would like give this video a like. I know I have to do it, but yeah, thank you guys. So, yeah, guys, that is basically it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.